Donovan narrowed his eyes and nodded. There is. We are currently allied with Veronica, so we can ask them for help. Arcientis raised an eyebrow. The thought of asking someone for help was too humiliating, but he knew that it was their only option. Will they be willing to help us? He asked in a skeptical tone. Veronica was ruled by a powerful and prideful woman. Asking that kind of person for help would be extremely difficult, especially now that Haroun no longer had its past military prowess. Donovan did a fist-palm salute as he replied, "You can leave it to me, Your Majesty. I will make sure that Veronica will help us in repelling the invaders." Hearing his words, the Emperor thought for a moment before giving his approval. "All right, you have my permission. Thank you for your trust, Your Majesty. You may go. We don't have much time, so you should communicate with Veronica as soon as possible," the Emperor urged. Donovan understood the urgency of the situation, so he didn't linger further and left right away after bidding the Emperor farewell. After he left, Arcientis's face darkened as he beckoned to the warriors standing guard at the door. "Bring the crown prince here." Sensing the Emperor's rage, the warriors nervously acknowledged the command with a bow. "Yes, Your Majesty." Inside Alaric's mansion in Midgard. "For how long do we have to stay here? I already miss my wife." Giovanni mumbled with a bored look. Alaric, who was seated adjacent to him, chuckled at his words. "I thought you didn't like her. How come you miss her all of a sudden?" Giovanni sent him a look and replied with a nasty grin. "I thought she was the same as those stuck-up noblewomen, but her sucking skills are top-notch. When he mentioned this, Alaric didn't bother to listen. He even covered his ears with manna to mute Giovanni's voice. The latter didn't notice anything at first, but he soon realized that Alaric wasn't listening, which made him displeased. "Look at this guy acting like a virgin after he accepted that big-breasted slave knight from me a few months ago." Giovanni snorted and crossed his arms. Suddenly, he heard a series of knocks on the door. "Hey, bastard! Someone is here to see you." Giovanni gestured to Alaric with an annoyed look. The latter understood what he meant. "You may enter," Alaric said while adjusting his sitting posture to a more presentable position. Inwardly grumbling, Giovanni did the same. Creak. A warrior stepped in and bowed to the two princes. "Greetings, Your Highnesses. I come here with a letter from His Highness, the Crown Prince. He told me to deliver it in person." Hearing this, Alaric and Giovanni furrowed their eyebrows in surprise. Usually, Leonard would send a letter via messenger bird. For him to send a messenger, an elite knight at that, meant that the letter was of great importance. Thinking about this, Alaric sent a knowing look to Sikas, who was standing behind him. Understanding his intentions, Sikas walked towards the messenger and carefully inspected the letter before handing it to Alaric. "There is no issue with the letter, Your Highness." Nodding his head, Alaric took the letter and quickly removed the seal. A moment later, Alaric's face turned serious. "Give it to me," Giovanni impatiently asked after seeing the change in his expression. Alaric passed him the letter and said, "It looks like we would have to stay here a little longer." Giovanni read the letter and frowned. "Did he really tell us to do this?" he asked while scratching his head. "It has his seal on it, so it definitely came from him." Alaric shrugged. According to the letter, Leonard wanted them to gather half of their troops and send them over to Helona, including Lucas and the entirety of the Griffin Knights Order. Giovanni leaned on his seat and rubbed his chin. So he is finally making another move, but which city is he planning to attack this time? Going by their initial plans, there were only 3 cities left for them to conquer: Noyam, Zerkith, and Nakalub. Alaric pondered deeply. Nakalub is the hardest to conquer of the 3, so it's most likely between the other 2. But you know how unpredictable that guy is. We will never know his next moves unless he tells us. He smiled bitterly. Giovanni nodded in agreement. "That's true, but this is making me annoyed. I want to join the action too. Why did he ask us to stay here in Midgard? Does he want to hog all the glory? That scheming bastard." He clicked his tongue. Alaric sneered. "You don't even listen to him. If you really want to join the action, you can just join the troops heading to Helona." Giovanni's eyes lit up. "Right, I can do that. Who does he think he is to tell me what to do? Ha ha ha. I am Giovanni Aurelius Sestania. Alaric shook his head as he watched him laughing arrogantly. Unless a miracle happens, this idiot has no hope of ever stealing Laynard's title as the crown prince. Giovanni didn't notice his unusual expression. He stood up with a broad grin and said, "The situation here has mostly stabilized, so there should be no problem with leaving you alone." Alaric shrugged. "Up to you. You won't listen to me anyway. It's good that you know." Giovanni chuckled. The two chatted some more before Giovanni eagerly left. "That bastard will definitely cause trouble for Laynard. Well, having him gone would make things more peaceful here," Alaric mumbled with a faint smile. Suddenly, a notification popped up in front of him. Undersir. Mission. Conquering Harun. Mission difficulty, hard. You have already conquered 3 cities, but the enemies are still lurking in the shadows, waiting for an opportune moment to attack. Conquer 3 more cities and force Harun to cede all conquered cities to Estania. Mission rewards: 2,500 battle points, 150 stat points, 750 EXP, random equipment card X1. Penalty for failure: destruction of the Estanian army. Half of the Estanian army in Midgard gathered outside the city the next day. It was a hot morning and the heat seeped through everyone's armor, but no one complained. They all just stood stoically as they respectfully looked at the man at the very front. "Today, we will be marching to Halona. I am sure your direct superiors had already informed you about the specifics, but I will repeat them. Once we reach Halona, we will be sent to attack another city, so you'd better prepare yourselves mentally." Lucas spoke authoritatively, his eyes looking sharp like those of an eagle. "Get on your horses. We are heading off." Upon hearing this, the warriors hopped onto their horses. Lucas did the same. "Have a safe trip, my lord." Alaric's voice drifted into his ears. Lucas turned his head and smiled faintly. "Don't worry about me. No one in this nation is a threat to me. I'm more worried about you." Alaric chuckled at his words. "Your son isn't as weak as you think. Who knows? Maybe in a year, I might catch up to you." Lucas raised an eyebrow and scoffed as he responded in a joking tone. "If that happens, I would have a decent sparring partner. Don't be careless while I'm gone. There might be enemies lurking somewhere," he reminded his son. Alaric nodded. "I will tell the men to keep an eye out." "Well then, I'm off." Lucas waved his hand. He then gently squeezed his legs to urge his horse to move. "You might think that what I said earlier was merely a joke. That day might come sooner, Dad." Alaric calmly watched his father leave. At this moment, he saw an annoying figure making faces at him. It was Giovanni. The guy disguised himself as one of the low-ranking warriors just so he could tag along with the troops. Alaric didn't know why, but he raised his middle finger like it was the right thing to do. Weird. Where did I learn this hand gesture? After some time, the Estanian troops led by Lucas were already quite some distance from the city. "Let's go back to the mansion," spoke Alaric as he turned around. "Yes, Your Highness." Galaner and Sikas responded in unison. The trio headed back to the city accompanied by 100 warriors. On their way back to the mansion, Alaric looked at Galaner and asked, "How is Scylla doing these days?" He left Scylla to familiarize herself with the environment, so she was mostly busy interacting with the warriors. At first, everyone didn't think seriously of her. But a few days ago, a transcendent knight from another household tried to pursue her. Alaric didn't know the exact details, but he heard that it turned into a fight that ended in Scylla's overwhelming victory. She didn't even use her integrated monster traits. She won with only her A-rank swordsmanship. Since then, no one dared to joke around with her. They all respectfully kept their distance. Even those confident transcendent knights were afraid of her. Dame Scylla has been helping around the clinic lately. I think she is there to look after Miss Ivana. Galaner responded. I see. Alaric nodded. She must be worried that Ivana would be targeted by a local. The residents of the city had been on edge since Ramondan was defeated. There were times when brawls between the residents and warriors occurred. I have already placed a capable security team on Ivana, but having Scylla on her side would be more reassuring. He rubbed his chin thoughtfully. Suddenly, a thought crossed his mind. Now that Dad is away, I can finally test out the improvements in my swordsmanship. Ever since upgrading his swordsmanship to L rank, he hadn't gotten the chance to test it out. Half an hour later, they arrived at the mansion. Galliner, Sekus, you two follow me to the training ground, Alaric instructed as soon as they arrived. The two acknowledged his command without saying a word. Although curious, the warriors who had returned with them didn't dare follow. They dispersed and headed to their respective posts. The mansion's training ground wasn't as big as the one in House Silversword, but the place was clean and well-maintained. The equipment was old, but they were still usable, so Alaric didn't bother to replace it. Alaric jumped off his horse and sent a deep look at the two people behind him. Galliner, you will be sparring with me. Sekus, prepare yourself since you will be sparring with me next once I'm done with Galliner. The two didn't give much of a reaction. Alaric had also sparred with them before, so they thought that he just wanted to stretch his muscles. However, when the sparring began, the two were surprised, especially Galliner, who was currently facing him. He looked at Alaric, who was standing not far from him. The latter held a pair of swords, eyeing him indifferently. Something is different about His Highness's aura. He could feel it. He could feel that Alaric was much stronger than before, and it wasn't just a small improvement. Whoosh! Suddenly, Alaric's figure turned into a blur, disappearing like a ghost. Fast. He's a lot faster now. Galliner's eyes shook with astonishment. He kept his eyes on Alaric, but he could barely follow the latter's movements. Alaric's speed was already on par, if not faster than Sekus. Galliner found it unbelievable. In the next moment, he saw a sword coming right at his face. What is this unusual coldness seeping through my body? Is it the ice element? But how is this possible? Controlling an element consumed a great deal of mana, but Alaric wasn't even releasing his mana. He was only wielding his sword in the unique method of his sword technique. How did His Highness's swordsmanship improve to this level in just a short amount of time? Clang. The fierce collision of their swords caused a loud clang. The strength. Galliner's eyes went wide in shock when he felt the strength in his attack. Alaric stood firmly, staring at him with a confident smile. I am not the same as before, Galliner. You need more than that to defeat me now. Hearing this, Galliner let out a smile. You have caught up to me, Your Highness. In the next moment, the two clashed several times. Clang, clang, clang. Each time their swords clashed, sparks would fly out. Galliner was starting to get serious as their battle progressed. Initially, he was only using a small portion of his strength, but unknowingly, he found himself using everything that he had. He no longer held back. Each strike contained his full physical power, but Alaric managed to evade or block them with ease. He is faster than me, but I still have the upper hand in the strength department. He discovered that Alaric would reveal a flaw momentarily before each attack, so he used it to capitalize on his next move. At this moment, Alaric suddenly appeared to his left, brandishing his swords with overwhelming force. Galliner lifted his broadsword, blocking his swords without hesitation. Clang! Galliner exerted more force and pushed him back. Alaric instinctively swung his short sword after he was pushed back, and this gave Galliner room to maneuver. Now is my chance. Seizing the opportunity, he evaded the blow and stabbed out with his broadsword. Whoosh! In that instant, Alaric suddenly disappeared. I knew you would do that. A teasing voice drifted into his ears. Stunned, Galliner hastily turned around, but when he did, he felt a prickling sensation on his neck. Looking down, he saw a sword just a few centimeters from touching his skin. I lost? He couldn't believe it. Just a few months ago, Alaric was still struggling against him. He intentionally revealed a flaw and I fell into his trap. He got me. He got me good. Thinking about this, Galliner lowered his broadsword and let out a smile. You have become a lot stronger, Your Highness. I'm no longer your opponent. Chuckling, Alaric sheathed his swords and replied, Things might be indifferent if we were to use our mana. Galaner shook his head. He knew Alaric was just saying this to save him from embarrassment. Besides, Alaric would be a lot more dangerous if he were to use his mana. He has that cheat-like domain too. He thought about Alaric's domain, which made him even more convinced. I learned a lot, Your Highness. Galaner sheathed his broadsword and lowered his head. Alaric waved his hand and turned his head to Sekus. He beckoned to the guy and said, It's your turn now, Sekus. Don't you need some rest, Your Highness? Sekus asked. Hearing this, Alaric shook his head. We weren't using mana, so I'm not that tired. Just come here and spar with me. Sekus no longer said anything. He stepped forward and slowly unsheathed his daggers. Meanwhile, Galaner quickly backed off to give them the floor. Looking at the indifferent man before him, Alaric took a deep breath. Sekus is faster and moves in an unpredictable manner. I need to be cautious when fighting him. He stretched his arms before unsheathing his swords. Shurring. Right after he pulled out his swords, Sekus vanished from his field of vision. Alaric narrowed his eyes, his senses in full alert. Behind me! He abruptly turned around and saw a dagger moving towards his neck. Clang! He deflected the dagger with his short sword. He then swung his main sword. Whoosh! Sekus seemed to have anticipated this and ducked at the right moment. After dodging his attack, Sekus aimed his dagger towards Alaric's chest. Is he seriously trying to kill me? He is aiming for fatal spots. Alaric tapped his feet and jumped off to the side, narrowly evading his opponent's dagger. They are so fast. If I don't use my mana, I wouldn't be able to follow their movements. Galaner's face was covered in sweat. Among all the warriors he had ever faced, he felt that Sekus was the most dangerous. The guy was like a shadow who would relentlessly aim for your weak spots. They had sparred a couple of times before, and it always ended with unexpected results. Sometimes he would win, but most of the time it was Sekus winning. Sekus is stronger in 1-versus-1 battles, while I am confident in my strength in war. While he was immersed in his thoughts, the battle between Alaric and Sekus had already concluded. Sekus was defeated. He lost in terms of techniques. Alaric was more skilled than him and also a lot stronger. His victory wasn't a surprise, and Galaner had already guessed that it would end like this. It was a good fight, Sekus. Alaric smiled faintly as he sheathed his swords. Sekus bowed his head. You two can head back to rest. I will stay here and train some more. Alaric hadn't had the chance to do his daily missions since he left Estania. All the necessary equipment for his exercises had already been brought to the training ground, so he thought of completing today's daily mission. Hearing this, Galaner and Sekus acknowledged his command with a bow, but they didn't leave. We can't leave you here alone, Your Highness. There might be assassins nearby, so we must be close to you at all times. Galaner spoke in a stern voice. Sekus didn't say anything, but he nodded Galaner's words. Alaric didn't force them to leave. All right. Even without you two here, I'm confident that I can detect the enemies. His sixth sense trait has been upgraded to a rank, so his senses have become more sensitive. He could even detect someone's aura several hundred meters from him, even if they concealed themselves. Suddenly, he remembered something important. I remember that I gained the SSS-Rank shield mastery trait, but I still don't have a suitable shield. Thinking about this, he sent Galaner a look and said, Galaner, bring Aldrin here. I have a task for him. Galaner didn't say a word and left after nodding his head. Aldrin was manning the perimeter of the mansion with his companions when they noticed Galaner approaching them. It's Sir Galaner. Greetings, Sir Galaner. Sir Galaner. Galaner beckoned to Aldrin. His Highness is looking for you, Aldrin. He is at the training ground. Don't make him wait for too long. Aldrin has been running errands for Alaric since they left Estania, so he was already used to being summoned from time to time. I will be there, sir. He nodded. Galaner didn't linger after conveying Alaric's message and left right away. Aldrin and his companions stared at his figure with a look of awe and worship. Sir Galaner looks so intimidating. He didn't even intentionally release his aura, but his presence alone is suffocating. Once this war is over, I think we will see massive changes in the Estanian Dragon leaderboard. Perhaps Sir Galaner would be the new rank 1. You think so? I believe it would be Sir Sekus. After all, he killed Ramondan in one shot. What do you think, Aldrin? Who do you think will be the new rank 1 in the Estanian Dragon leaderboard? Sensing their curious gaze, Aldrin shook his head with a chuckle. Let's talk about this once I return. I'll be leaving first. Come on, man. Don't leave us hanging here. Give us an answer before you go. Hey, Aldrin. Aldrin laughed as he walked away. These guys, I'm glad that they can joke around now. A few days ago, the same companions looked miserable and lonely. They were greatly affected by the deaths of their comrades. He was saddened to see them looking so listless. I wonder what His Highness wants me to do this time. Soon, he arrived at the training ground and saw Alaric doing his strange exercises. He knew that Alaric didn't want to be interrupted while doing his exercises, so he patiently waited. His Highness will be done with this exercise shortly. Just stay where you are. A voice suddenly echoed behind him, almost making him jump in shock. Turning his head, he saw an expressionless Sekus standing behind him. Was he behind me the whole time? Sir Sekus, he nervously greeted. The latter calmly nodded in response. Half an hour later, Alaric took a short break and beckoned to Aldrin. Come here, I have a task for you. Aldrin quickly rushed to his side and lowered his head. What do you want me to do, Your Highness? Go find the best blacksmith in the city and bring them here. It would be great if they specialize in making shields. Midgard was known for its mining industry, but it was also famous for having the largest number of blacksmiths and craftsmen. They worked hand in hand to build the most amazing equipment which would be distributed to all corners of Harun. Can I bring some people with me? Having more people would help speed up the task. Aldrin asked cautiously. Alaric thought for a moment before nodding his head. You can, but they must be tight-lipped. I will keep that in mind. Aldrin already had a few people in mind. One more thing, Your Highness. What if the blacksmith we found doesn't want to come with us? Hearing this, Alaric sent him a deep look. When making equipment, the blacksmith's mental state was very important. If they were forced to work against their will, it would negatively impact the forging process. Alaric didn't want a mediocre shield. He wanted at least a relic level 1. Just bring those who are willing to take the job, and don't pressure them into coming with you. He responded. I understand. I will take my leave now. Aldrin bowed and left with haste. Alaric rubbed his chin thoughtfully. I wonder if he can find a blacksmith who would be willing to forge a shield for an enemy. Thinking about this, Alaric shook his head and resumed his exercises. Will there even be someone who would willingly forge something for us? Aldrin mumbled to himself as he went to find his companions. With Harun and Estania at war, it wouldn't be a surprise for the residents from both countries to hate each other. Aldrin realized that this was a difficult task. He headed to his designated guarding spot and found his companions chatting in loud voices. He was still a few hundred meters from them, but he could already hear them talking. These bastards are slacking off again. It looks like I had been lenient on them. Hey! He called out in a stern voice. His companions were startled, but when they realized that it was him, they smiled in relief. Aldrin, you scared us there. I thought a higher-up was here to do an inspection. Have you completed His Highness's task? Aldrin was about to reprimand them, but he swallowed back the words he was about to say when he saw their radiant faces. I will forgive them for now. Come here. I need you all for His Highness's task. He gestured at them with a serious expression. Seeing his face go into work mode, his companion quickly gathered around him, their expression gradually turning serious. What is it? What do you want us to do? Sensing their nervousness, Aldrin chuckled. You guys can relax. It's not a dangerous job. We just need to find the best blacksmiths in the city and bring them here to make a shield for His Highness. Hearing this, his companions looked visibly relieved. We will need a local to help us find the right person. Considering our situation, it might be hard to find someone who will help us. You have a point. We might need some money to bribe the locals. I don't have money though. I will give you some money. Just help me find the right people. Aldrin rolled his eyes. His companions beamed upon hearing his words. You heard him. Let's give it our best, folks. Aldrin smiled wryly. Go and bring your equipment. We are leaving at once. 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. Alaric had just completed his daily exercises in the training ground. It's been 3 days since I sent Aldrin on the task, but there is still no news from him. It looks like I would have to wait until we return to Estania before I can get a shield for myself, he thought as he wiped off the sweat on his face with a clean cloth. He was about to head inside the mansion when he saw a cavalryman rushing towards him with an urgent look. Your Highness! The cavalryman jumped off his horse and ran to his side. Sir Aldrin has found the people you are looking for. He said that they will be here in 2 hours. Hearing this, Alaric was ecstatic. He tossed a gold coin to the messenger. All right, thank you for informing me. You may leave. Thank you for the reward, Your Highness. The messenger grinned. After the messenger left, Alaric went inside the mansion with a smile. How did Aldrin convince the blacksmiths? He was already expecting him to fail, but Aldrin gave him a huge surprise. 2 hours later, Aldrin and his companions returned to the mansion with 10 muscular men. Aldrin lowered his head and said, Your Highness, I apologize for making you wait for too long. These are the blacksmiths I found for you. They also brought their apprentices to help with the forging process. Great job, Aldrin. I'm pleased with your performance. Alaric praised him with a smile. I don't deserve your praise, Your Highness. Aldrin humbly replied. Alaric chuckled and sent a signal to Sekus, who was standing next to him. Give Aldrin the reward I prepared for him. Hearing this, Sekus nodded and handed Aldrin a pouch filled with shiny golden coins. Aldrin wasn't expecting any kind of reward, so he was surprised when he saw how much money he received. He would have declined the reward if he were alone, but chose to accept it for the sake of his companions. You can distribute them to your companions accordingly. Alaric's voice drifted into his ears. Yes, Your Highness. Thank you for the reward. Aldrin and his companions bowed gratefully. You guys may go. You deserve some rest. Alaric dismissed them. Understanding his cue, Aldrin nodded and left with his friends. Alaric turned his head to the blacksmiths and appraised them one by one. The 7 apprentices had C-rank or D-rank forging traits, which wasn't too bad. 2 of the blacksmiths had A-rank forging traits, while the last man's was an S-rank. I believe Aldrin had already informed you guys about your task, but in case he didn't, I will say it for you. I want a shield. If possible, I want a relic level 1. All the materials needed to forge the shield have already been prepared. Do you have any questions? Alaric observed their facial expressions. There were no signs of hostility from them, but he could tell that they were nervous. Can you promise the safety of our families? One of the blacksmiths, a muscular middle-aged man with graying hair, asked in a cautious tone. Aldrin had already promised to protect their families, but they wanted to hear it from the mouth of his boss. Alaric smiled reassuringly. Of course, I will send my subordinates to protect your families. If you want, I can also offer to give them shelter in Estania. The blacksmiths were stunned. When Aldrin offered them the job to forge equipment, they were hesitant since they were afraid to face ostracism from their own countrymen. However, the promised rewards were too great for them to pass up, so they agreed reluctantly. The fact that you took this job means that you are in dire need of money. I can give you the money and all the resources you need. I also promise to protect your families. House Silversword had a group of blacksmiths, but because of the recent expansion in the household's military, the blacksmiths couldn't keep up with the increased demand for equipment. You want us to change affiliation? Aren't you afraid that we would betray you? They couldn't believe what they were hearing. Alaric smiled. I'm not forcing you guys to join me. As for you betraying me, I will worry about that when the time comes. To make these people obedient, he just needed to give them money and security. Just to remind you, Harun might cede Midgard to Estania. The blacksmiths didn't respond for a long while. Alaric patiently waited as they discussed their choices. After about 10 minutes, the oldest blacksmith stepped forward and said, Can we give our answer after we forge the equipment you want us to make? It was an answer that contained a few meanings. It meant that they were still hesitant, but they were considering it. No problem. You can take your time. Alaric nodded. Do you want us to start forging now? Alaric shook his head. No. I am aware that blacksmiths need to be in their best mental state when forging. I can't have you start working when you are still tired from the journey. You can rest for the day and begin your job tomorrow. The blacksmiths were surprised. Thank you for your consideration, but I suggest we do the measurements today so we can start forging tomorrow, the oldest blacksmith said. All right, what do you need from me? Alaric agreed. You can take your seat, my lord. We will do the rest. To make a fitting shield for someone, there were many things to consider. The user's height, arm length, hand size, strength, and a few other factors must be taken into account. The blacksmiths asked him questions about his preferred style and weight of the shield. They also asked him what kind of skill he would engrave on the shield. The entire process took more than an hour, which left him exhausted. That took longer than I expected. Alaric stretched his muscles as he watched the departing blacksmiths. Outside the main gate of Helona, 300,000 Estanian warriors had gathered, standing motionless like unsheathed swords. Warriors of Estania, we have already conquered 3 cities of Harun, but they still refuse to acknowledge our nation's power. Their emperor, drunk in his delusions, is seeking outside support to recapture the cities we have conquered. They want to retake the very cities which our men had sacrificed for. Should we allow them to do as they please? Shouted the crown prince, riding his imperial horse, his voice resonating across the land. We will never allow them to take back what is already ours. We will never allow them to take back what is already ours. The warriors echoed his words, with blazing fighting spirit. Looking at the emotional warriors, Leonard smiled coldly. Today, we will be marching to Noyum and show their emperor the result of his hesitation. Emperor John Philip of Estania requested the Emperor of Harun to cede Atarkan, Helona, and Midgard in exchange for the peace of the 2 nations. However, the Emperor of Harun, Arsientus van Harun, didn't send a response which showed that he had no intentions of giving up his lands. Furthermore, Leonard received a tip from his spies that the Emperor of Harun had sent a messenger to request military assistance from Veronica. Since you refuse to give up, you will have to face the consequences of your foolish decisions. Leonard narrowed his eyes. With a raise of his hand, he announced, "We are setting off." As soon as he made this announcement, the loud drumming sounds of the war drums echoed. Each beat of the drums made the hearts of the warriors pump with intensity. The next day, Alaric was getting ready to visit the workshop to observe the forging process when a messenger came to visit his mansion. "Your Highness," a letter from His Highness, the Crown Prince. The messenger carefully took out a letter from his inner pocket. Hearing this, Alaric raised an eyebrow and sent a nod to Sikas. Sikas understood his cue and took the letter from the messenger. He inspected the seal and after verifying that nothing was wrong, he handed it to Alaric. "The seal is untouched, Your Highness." Nodding his head, Alaric removed the seal to read the contents. Upon reading the first lines, he was surprised. To think that the arrogant ruler of Harun would resort to this. How unbefitting of him to humble himself. He mumbled in a mocking tone. Leonard also wrote in his letter that he was leading an army of 300,000 warriors to Noyum. It was a sizable force, and a small city like Noyum couldn't hope to defend an army of that size. Why did Leonard have to bring that many soldiers to conquer Noyum? 100,000 or less should be enough. Just what is that guy thinking? From the information they gathered, Noyum's military forces had the smallest number among the cities they were targeting. It had fewer than 50,000 warriors, including the private forces of the noble families in the city. He isn't planning to annihilate the entire city, right? Thinking about this, he tossed a gold coin to the messenger and motioned for him to leave. The messenger caught the shiny coin and left with a grin. After he left, Alaric leaned on his seat with a thoughtful expression. "Leonard, I really can't guess your move." Turning his head, he asked, "Sikas, do we have someone with a bright mind in our troops?" Sikas was silent for a moment before he gave his response. We do have a few warriors with incredible minds, but the one who stands out the most is Sir Sherwin. He has both experience and knowledge, so he can give valuable inputs if you so desire. Alaric furrowed his eyebrows. Sherwin was indeed an outstanding mind, but he had gone to Helona with his father. Is there someone else? It doesn't matter if they are a low-ranking warrior or a servant. Tell me, who among those who are here in Midgard could help me guess the reason for the Crown Prince's actions? Alaric asked. Sikas stared deeply at him and replied, There is one such person, Matilda. Alaric was stunned when he mentioned this name. You mean that woman? He couldn't believe it. Matilda might be the daughter of a merchant from Veronica, but she hadn't shown him remarkable wisdom. She was good in other departments, but that wasn't what he needed right now. Sensing his skepticism, Sikas explained. Don't underestimate her, Your Highness. She only appears like a clueless little servant in front of you, but behind that angelic facade is a capable mind with a depth of knowledge unusual for someone her age. Alaric rubbed his chin. For Sikas to praise her like that, it seemed like he had overlooked Matilda's intelligence. Sikas has information on everyone in the household. There should be some truth to his words. Bring her here. I would like to hear her opinion regarding this matter. Alaric instructed. Sikas nodded to acknowledge his command. Your subordinate obeys. Whoosh! Sikas turned around and disappeared with a whoosh. A moment later, he returned with Matilda, who was dressed in a medical practitioner's uniform. She had been helping Ivana at the clinic, so she hadn't had the chance to change into a new set of clothes when Alaric summoned her. Matilda stared at the handsome figure seated behind the desk. She walked towards him and bowed her head deeply, her cleavage in full display. Your Highness, what can I do for you? He didn't ask me to come here to do that, right? She felt a bit nervous, but there was also a hint of expectation in her heart. Alaric saw drawn by her cleavage, but he quickly looked away. This woman, is she intentionally doing this? He feigned calmness as he handed her the letter. Read this and tell me your thoughts. Matilda was taken aback. She didn't expect this kind of request from him. She was already expecting him to make her do something intimate, but his words threw her off. Did you not hear me? Alaric's voice broke her from her stupor. I apologize, Your Highness. I was just a bit surprised. Excuse me. She adjusted her clothes before she grabbed the letter. What is this? Isn't this a letter from the Crown Prince? Why would he ask me to read something this important? Matilda felt inexplicably nervous. She was only a servant of House Silversword, and someone of her status would never be allowed to read classified information or documents. Is he making me read this so he would have a reason to execute me? Her mind spiraled out of control as she began to overthink the motive behind Alaric's actions. Alaric noticed her trembling hands, making him raise an eyebrow. Don't be nervous. I just want to hear your thoughts about the Crown Prince's decision. Why do you think he took 300,000 warriors to Noyam that only has fewer than 50,000 soldiers? Matilda stiffened upon hearing this, and realization dawned on her. I see. So he just wants to hear my thoughts on this matter. Before giving you my opinion, can you tell me more about the situation? She didn't have access to military information, so she couldn't give him a proper answer. Alaric understood what she was implying, so he explained the whole situation to her starting from the very beginning. He told her about the Crown Prince's plan to conquer the 6 cities and all those they had discussed in their meetings. Matilda listened with great attention, afraid that she would miss a detail. I see. So that's what's happening now. Aren't we in a dangerous position? She became scared when she realized the truth. Why do you think he made this decision? Alaric repeated his question. Matilda took a deep breath before she replied. I think His Highness is planning to conquer the 3 cities successively. Alaric's eyes went wide upon hearing this. You think so? But why? Wouldn't our troops be exhausted if they tried to conquer one city after another? That's true. Our troops will be exhausted. But His Highness probably made this decision so we could gain control of the 6 cities before Veronica could intervene. With 6 cities under our hands, we would have the upper hand in the next negotiations. Matilda replied. Alaric was astounded. So you're also amazing in other aspects. He subconsciously blurted out his thoughts. Hearing this, Matilda blushed in embarrassment. Alaric realized his mistake, so he quickly changed the subject. Do you think he will succeed? Matilda didn't expose him and responded with a nod. With Lord Dominic and Lord Lucas by his side, there is no way for His Highness to fail. However, there is a big factor that might change the outcome of the battle. And this big factor is? Alaric curiously asked. Leroy Durova. Alaric frowned when she mentioned this name. Leroy Durova was someone who had betrayed Haroun to join their side. He was a 4-ringed beast soul grandmaster who could command a catastrophe-grade beast. Thinking about it carefully, he was indeed an unstable factor. Oh, I think I understand it now, Matilda suddenly exclaimed. I think His Highness, the Crown Prince, is doing this to test if he could trust Leroy. This trip would expose whether Leroy had truly pledged allegiance to Estania. If Leroy helped the Estanian army in conquering the 3 cities, Haroun would definitely be furious and cut ties with him. Alaric was dumbfounded. Not even an hour had passed since she came here, but she already managed to give an incredible input about the situation. This girl, she is more than a slave after all. 5 days after Leonard led the troops towards Noyum, they finally caught sight of the city. It was situated in the middle of a plain, so the city wasn't hard to find. It was surrounded by tall earthen walls equipped with old ballistas. Just like the report said, their artillery is old and some are probably unusable. Leonard thought as he looked at the distant city. Your Highness, please give me the command. I will make them surrender without us needing to fight. A voice suddenly drifted into his ears. Turning his head, Leonard saw that it was Dominic. There is no need to trouble yourself, Lord Dominic. Noyum will surrender on its own even if we don't force it. Dominic was taken aback by his words. Ha! He found it unbelievable. All the strongholds and cities they encountered had never surrendered to them. They all put up a resistance, refusing to surrender despite being at a disadvantage. The residents of Haroun are some of the most prideful people on the continent. He couldn't imagine these kinds of people willingly surrendering to their army. I already sent someone ahead of us. If nothing went wrong, Noyum will open its gates for our troops. Leonard smiled faintly. Dominic frowned. Are you talking about Leroy's troops? Last night, there was a small portion of their troops that separated from the main army, and the person leading them was Leroy. He thought that the Crown Prince sent the guy for another errand, but it turned out that it was for this matter. That's right. The Crown Prince didn't hide it from him. I want to see if Leroy can be trusted. I still can't bring myself to trust him. After all, he was born and raised in Haroun. He might have some lingering attachment to his home country. Dominic understood his intentions. What if he sides with Noyum? With a cold smile, the Crown Prince replied. I was hoping that would happen. I don't really want to work with that guy. However, I don't think Leroy would choose to betray us now. Haroun is no longer the powerhouse that it was back then. If he is smart, Leroy would choose to dedicate himself to Estania. As they marched, the Estanian troops stared at the city with cold gazes. Your Highness, I think something is wrong, remarked Dominic with a frown. Normally, soldiers would be atop the walls to monitor the situation outside the city. However, Dominic didn't find a single soldier. There is also no one at the gates, Lucas added in a solemn tone. Hearing this, Leonard scrunched his eyebrows. He was silent for a moment when a thought crossed his mind. Could it be? With a look of surprise, he kicked his horse's belly and shouted to the troops. Advance! Move faster! The military officers were quite surprised by his command, but they still sent a signal to their troops. What is going on, Your Highness? Dominic asked as he urged his horse to match Leonard's pace. Lucas didn't say anything, but he was also confused. Without turning his head, Leonard replied. There can only be 2 reasons why the walls are empty. He paused, his face turning serious before he continued. first one is that Leroy has betrayed us and warned the people of Noyam to leave. The second one is that Leroy attacked the city on his own. The two venerables were stunned when they heard this. Leroy brought 20,000 warriors with him. Even without the help of the golem, his troops had the strength to fight Noyam's city defense forces. Lucas and Dominic didn't believe that Leroy was stupid enough to betray them, so they thought he must have chosen to attack Noyam on his own. But why would he do something so dangerous? Noyam's military forces might be lacking, but fighting them with only 20,000 warriors would still result in heavy casualties. Lucas furrowed his eyebrows. Because he wants to be acknowledged, Dominic said with a stern look. Lucas raised an eyebrow upon hearing this. He may have joined us, but he still hasn't shown much to make us acknowledge him. If he could take Noyam on his own, it would cement his allegiance to Estania. Dominic explained. Lucas revealed a look of realization. I see. The Estanian troops charged without stopping. The warriors thought that an enemy ambush was coming, so they braced themselves for an attack. But when they reached the enemy's range, there was still no movement from Noyam's side. What is going on? We already entered their range, but they still hadn't attacked us. Could there be a trap waiting for us up ahead? Maybe the people of Noyam had already escaped. The soldiers were baffled, but they pushed forward without slowing down. When they got closer, they finally realized that the walls were unmanned. There are no enemies atop the walls. They must have fled out of fear. At this moment, the gate was only a few hundred meters from them, so Leonard raised his hand to signal the troops to slow down. He then shouted, "Siege units, forward! Destroy the gates!" As soon as he gave the command, the vanguard units made a path for the siege units to move in. A huge battering ram was pushed out by 20 muscular warriors. 50 shield bearers also came to protect them. Push! Pull! Push! Pull! They had done this a couple of times in practice and in actual combat, so the siege units quickly got to work. Bam! Each time the pointed tip of the ram struck the gate, a heavy bam rang out. Bam! Bam! After 3 strikes, the wooden part of the gate was pried open. Continue. Push harder. Come on. Push. Pull. At the 7th strike of the battering ram, the gate collapsed from the impact. Bam! Seeing this, Leonard immediately gave the command as he unsheathed his sword. Siege units, fall back. Vanguard troops, follow me. We are heading in. The siege units didn't dawdle. They lifted the battering ram and quickly moved to the side to give way to the vanguard troops to enter. As they entered the gate, Dominic and Lucas moved to Leonard's left and right side, providing him with a tight and impregnable defense. Hiya! Hiya! Upon entering, they saw the streets covered in blood. There were also corpses of warriors strewn across the road. Looking at the wounds on the corpses and the degree of the mess, everyone could tell that a tough battle had taken place just recently. That guy is one prideful lunatic. He is a decisive one. I give him that. Leonard mumbled at the sight of this mess. What should we do, Your Highness? Should we help him? Dominic asked while looking at the Crown Prince. Since it was confirmed that Leroy had chosen to side with them, he wanted to lend the guy a hand to minimize his losses. Leonard shook his head. He chose this, so we have to respect it, but we can't just wait here either. Lord Dominic, send a few scout teams to observe the situation, but don't let them interfere in the battle. Tell them to report to me immediately once they find out the situation. He instructed. I understand. Dominic nodded and left to deliver his instructions to the troops. Meanwhile, deep within the city, a fierce battle was taking place. Lord Leroy, why are you doing this? You are a venerable of Haroun. Why are you working with those bastards from Estania? Shouted the injured commander of Noyam's city defense forces. They had been fighting for several hours, and despite their advantage in numbers, Leroy's troops had continuously pushed them back. From having 45,000 warriors, they were down to less than 30,000, and all of them were covered in wounds. On the other hand, Leroy's army only lost a little more than 2,000. Leroy didn't actively join the battle, but he wasn't passive either. He killed whoever was in front of him, whether they were an acquaintance or a stranger. With a cold face, Leroy responded, "Weren't you one of those people who wanted me to leave Haroun?" As someone who had come from a humble background, he had faced numerous criticisms from the aristocratic houses. They never once took him seriously. Even after he became a venerable, they still secretly talked behind his back. Leroy didn't think much of it back then, but now that he had joined Estania, he no longer had the reason to be lenient to those who had offended him. The commander of Noyam's city defense forces was a middle-aged man with a thick and messy beard. He was usually full of arrogance and confidence, but he looked pathetic now with all the injuries and bruises. "What?" he exclaimed when he heard Leroy's words. "Stop acting dumb. I knew you guys were talking shit behind my back. Did you think I wouldn't find out about it?" Leroy sent him a cold smile. "Omar, I kept it bottled in since we were fellow citizens, but I don't have a reason to do that anymore. I have already betrayed Haroun."
Dudin.
Omar, the commander of Noyam's city defense forces, subconsciously took a step back when he sensed Leroy's killing intent. His heart was beating erratically. It was as if the very fiber of his being was screaming danger. He was a transcendent knight, one of the best and strongest warriors of Haroun. However, in front of a venerable like Leroy, he was still nothing but a slightly stronger bug. "Wait, Lord Leroy, there seems to be a misunderstanding between us. I never said anything bad about you. It's just Omar wanted to explain himself, but Leroy cut off his words. "Enough!" Leroy's earth-shattering voice almost made everyone's eardrums bleed. "You are not the first on my list, Omar. I have already killed a few people, so you won't be lonely in the afterlife." After saying these words, Leroy grabbed his broadsword and charged towards Omar with unbelievable speed. Whoosh! Omar didn't expect him to attack all of a sudden, so he was late to react. He could only lift his shield halfway through his face when Leroy's broadsword sliced through his neck. KHSHK. Without suspense, Leroy decapitated the man's head. His expression remained cold. Thud. The headless corpse fell to the ground with a dull thud. After killing him, Leroy lifted his sword and stabbed the head, which still wore an expression of fear. KHSHK. From now on, I will cut down those who will look down on me and my family, whether they are the Emperor or God himself, he muttered under his breath. Omar's death sent Noyam's city defense forces into disarray. A huge portion of their troops threw down their weapons and surrendered, while the others chose to flee in all directions. There were also a few loyal warriors who chose to attack Leroy out of rage. With a ruthless expression, Leroy commanded his troops. "Kill those who refuse to surrender. Show them no mercy." Another battle broke out, but this time it only lasted for about half an hour. 5,000 city defense warriors perished, while the rest either fled or surrendered. On the other hand, Leroy's troops only lost a few hundred men. It was an overwhelming victory. Looking at the defeated warriors kneeling with complicated faces, Leroy instructed his troops. "Tie them up and take all of their equipment. If they resist, kill them." Everyone shuddered at his vicious words. With his warnings, the city defense forces cooperated. They even voluntarily handed in their equipment and offered no complaints. Everything went smoothly, and all that was left was to clean up the aftermath. Suddenly, Leroy turned his head and narrowed his eyes. From a distance, he noticed a few people observing them. Those people, they are Estanian scouts. It must be them. They are already here. Thinking about this, he jumped onto his horse and approached the scout teams. "Hey, buddies, relax. We're all on the same side," he shouted when he saw that they were about to escape. The scout teams stopped and looked at him with strange gazes. "What do you want?" one of them asked cautiously. Leroy was a bit annoyed at the disrespectful tone, but he held it in. These people were still guarded against him, but he could understand their situation. If he were in their place, he would have reacted the same way. "It's all right, my friend. There's no need to be nervous. You are Estanian scouts, right?" "Yes. But what does that have to do with you, my lord?" Leroy smiled faintly and tapped the man's shoulder. "Bring me to His Highness. I would like to give him my report." This guy is too scary. The scout almost buckled under the pressure. All right, but can you get your hands off me first? I can't breathe. Oh, sorry about that. Ha. Laynard instructed the troops to set up camp outside the city. They have been marching non-stop for a few days, so most of the soldiers were already exhausted. At this moment, Laynard was chatting with the two venerables when they noticed a few people approaching them. It's him. He's here. The two venerables mumbled with stern faces upon seeing a familiar figure among the people coming towards them. Laynard followed their gazes and let out a smile. Greetings, Your Highness. Leroy lightly lowered his head. You made an extreme choice, Lord Venerable, but I'm glad that you chose to side with Estania. Laynard waved his hand and beckoned to him, gesturing for him to come closer. Leroy walked closer and smiled. I hope you will be fair when handing out the rewards, Your Highness. Dominic frowned. This guy was speaking informally to the Crown Prince, which made him a bit uncomfortable. Laynard seemed to have sensed this, so he gestured at him not to make a fuss. Naturally, if you do your job well, you will be rewarded handsomely. Ha. The Crown Prince wasn't offended by Leroy's informal speech. Leroy grinned. Speaking of which, I have already taken care of Noyam. There was some resistance, but the issue has been dealt with. We have captured close to 30,000 warriors. The residents were scared, but they all stayed in their homes, so none of them were harmed. The city officials and the heads of the various aristocratic houses are now temporarily detained in the City Hall's prison. That concludes my report. Laynard nodded with a chuckle. Well done, Lord Venerable. We will handle the rest here. You can tell your troops to get some rest. With the officials and aristocratic leaders detained, Noyam quickly fell into the hands of the Estanian troops. Some residents protested, but the Estanian troops quickly arrested them. Later that day, Laynard summoned the three venerables to his tent to discuss their next course of action. Thank you for coming here, venerables. The Crown Prince greeted them warmly. He gestured at them with a smile. Please take your seats. I asked the servants to bring in some refreshments. If you find it lacking, I hope you forgive my lack of courtesy. Upon taking their seats, a group of servants entered the tent to offer them the snacks that were prepared for them. The food wasn't fancy. They were just common pastries sold to the public, but this was already considered a good snack, especially during wartime. The venerables didn't complain about the food. After the servants left, Laynard cleared his throat. We are pressed for time, so I will keep this short. You can eat while you listen. He took a short pause to observe their expressions before he continued. We have already taken control of 4 cities, so there are only 2 left from our targets, Zerkith and Nakalub. Conquering Zerkith wouldn't be difficult. They have close to 100,000 warriors, but the city's defenses are lacking. Zerkith is just a small city like Noyam, so the officials didn't invest much in their military. They also have a bunch of corrupt officials who pocketed the budget that was supposed to be spent on repairing the city's walls and replacing the old artillery. Laynard turned his head to Lucas. Lord Lucas, I want you to lead 100,000 warriors to conquer Zerkach. Can you do it? Lucas furrowed his eyebrows. That wouldn't be an issue, but why are you only sending 1/3 of our troops? Laynard smiled faintly and replied, because the rest of us will head straight to Nakalub and conquer it. Lucas raised an eyebrow, while the other 2 venerables fell into deep thought. If we wait until Veronica sends its army, we will have a hard time conquering Nakalub. We need to take control of the city before they arrive. Laynard spoke in a stern voice. I see. When do you want me to leave? Lucas asked in a low voice. With a deep voice, Laynard responded. You should march tomorrow before sunrise. Lucas let out a deep breath and nodded his head. All right, you can leave this to me. Your Highness, if we are sending 1/3 of our troops to Zerkith and the remaining troops to Nakalub, what about Noyam? No one will be left to take care of the situation here. Dominic frowned. They had just conquered Noyam, so the situation was still unstable. There could be an uprising at any moment. Hearing this, Laynard smiled faintly. Don't worry. Someone will stay here to clean up the mess. The 3 venerables furrowed their eyebrows. They all had one question on their minds. Who is he talking about? Inside a different tent, Giovanni took off his armor. That was exhausting. By the way, is the standard armor worn by our soldiers usually this heavy? He grumbled as he sent a look to Derek. The latter smiled awkwardly and replied, Your Highness, you asked me to quickly find you some armor. The only ones available were the armors worn by our heavy cavalry troops. I got you the lightest one. What? No wonder it was so heavy. Go and find me another one. Something that is much lighter and more flexible. I can barely move around in that big piece of junk. Giovanni complained with an exasperated look. Derek could only helplessly agree. Yes, Your Highness. I will find one for you right away. Just as he was about to leave, a voice suddenly echoed from outside the tent. Is there some inside? Giovanni was startled, and he quickly sent Derek a questioning look. The latter shook his head and mouthed the words, I don't know who that is. Go and find out why he is here. Giovanni instructed in a whispering voice. Derek nodded to acknowledge the command. Did someone recognize us? He was nervous. They didn't follow the commands of the Crown Prince, who was the person in charge of this expedition. If they were caught, they would be charged with insubordination. The second prince would be able to get away with some light punishments, but the same thing couldn't be said for him and the others. I hope I'm Ro. When Derek stepped out of the tent, he saw Laynard standing next to a warrior. Why your H Highness. Laynard chuckled. Why do you look like you've seen a ghost? Do I look that scary? Derek grimaced. And not at all, Your Highness. I'm just surprised, is all. Laynard patted his shoulder and asked with a deep look. He's inside, right? Derek wanted to say no, but when he saw the Crown Prince's smiling face, he gulped hard. I'm sorry, Your Highness, but we will all be punished if I lie here. He let out a sigh and nodded with a defeated expression. Yes, Your Highness. Good choice, Derek. Laynard beamed at him before he entered the tent. Derek could only facepalm himself as he watched the Crown Prince enter the tent. I'm done for. A moment later, Giovanni's furious voice echoed. Derek, you dumbass. Get your ass over here. Hearing this, Derek steeled himself and stepped inside the tent. Upon entering, he saw Laynard seated on a chair with a gentle smile on his face. Giovanni was standing in front of him, looking completely annoyed. My dear brother, why are you taking it out on him? It's your fault for not following orders. The Crown Prince looked like he was enjoying the situation. Giovanni snorted. Rubbing his temples, he grabbed a chair for himself and asked, What do you want? Just spit it out already. Laynard adjusted his sitting posture and replied, I will pretend that nothing happened, but you must stay and deal with the matters here in Noyam. You want to dump all this mess on me? Do you think I'm your errand boy or something? Giovanni sneered with his arms crossed. You are not my errand boy, but I am your superior. Laynard let out a carefree smile. You! Giovanni couldn't offer a rebuttal, so he could only glare at his older brother. Giovanni, you might not be afraid of the consequences, but think about your subordinates. Because of your decision, they would be charged with insubordination. I'm sure you are aware of what their punishments will be. Laynard's face turned serious when he said this. My dear brother, if you want to be a good leader, you need to learn how to value the people around you. A leader must think of the well-being of his people before his own. Giovanni fell silent at his words. His eyebrows knitted into a deep frown. After half a minute of silence, he opened his mouth. Fine. I will take care of the matters here in Noyam, but I will need more soldiers to keep the locals in check. He went here in a disguise, so he left most of his troops in Midgard. Laynard agreed without hesitation. No problem. I will leave 10,000 soldiers here, including Lord Kristen Evander and 1,000 Griffin Knights. There were still 30,000 soldiers in Noyam's city defense forces, not to mention the private armies of the local aristocrats. Hearing his words, Giovanni shook his head. 10,000 warriors? That's not enough. There are still many local aristocrats who haven't sent out their private armies. If they decided to work together, 10,000 warriors wouldn't be enough to stop them. Kristen Evander and his Griffin Knights order might be powerful, but there were only 1,000 of them. If they were besieged by thousands of enemies, even a strong army like the Griffin Knights order would struggle. Laenard shrugged. That's for you to worry about. If I give him more troops, he wouldn't take this task seriously. Giovanni, you need to start learning how to think critically. Are you serious? Things might go wrong if we are even a little bit careless. Giovanni was dissatisfied. Then don't be careless. Laenard stared deeply at him. You are really something. Damn it. Fine. Looking annoyed, Giovanni massaged his forehead. Laenard rose to his feet and chuckled. I knew I could count on you, my dear brother. Fuck off. Giovanni gave him the middle finger. Where did you learn that from? From our little cousin, Alaric. Who else would teach me something so strange? Giovanni shooed him away with an annoyed look. Just shut your mouth and leave already. Otherwise, I might not be able to hold myself from punching you. Laenard shook his head. Before leaving, he gave him one last reminder. Don't underestimate those aristocrats. They will come to bite you if you show even a hint of weakness. I'm off, my dear brother. Laenard bid him farewell and left. Giovanni was vexed. That bastard, he nags a lot. He is even worse than Alaric. Derek, who was silent the entire time, snickered upon hearing this. Giovanni glared at him. I'm not done with you. Come here. Sit on the air and put your arms forward. Derek's smile stiffened, but he still complied with the punishment. Yes, your highness. 2 days later in Midgard, Alaric had just completed his daily mission and decided to visit the workshop to observe the blacksmiths do their work. He didn't go there alone. He brought Matilda under the suspicious gaze of Ivana. Your highness, where are we headed to? Matilda asked curiously. She was dressed in the standard Estanian warrior's uniform, the one worn by the light cavalryman. Matilda was a one-ringed beast soul novice, so she was a bit stronger than the average person. Wearing this kind of armor wasn't an issue for her. The workshop. We will observe the blacksmiths forge my shield. Alaric replied. After discovering Matilda's sharp mind, he decided to train her as a capable assistant. He was confident in his strength, but he lacked when it came to strategies and tactics. Matilda would supplement what he lacked. It took him a great deal of effort to convince Ivana to agree with his decision. The workshop wasn't far from Alaric's mansion. After about 15 minutes of walking, they found the place. The building was quite old with some cracks on the wall, but the forging equipment was surprisingly new. From outside the workshop, they could already hear hammering sounds. This brings back memories. Alaric subconsciously smiled when he recalled a distant memory. Let's go in, he mumbled. The two walked inside the workshop. Behind them, Galliner and Sekus remained outside the building. It's so hot here. Matilda fanned her face, which was covered in thick beads of sweat. Alaric turned his head and saw her face reddening because of the high temperature. He looked away and said, Bear with it. The heat will be stronger once we are there. Can I at least take off this breastplate? I really can't handle this kind of heat, your highness. Matilda coquettishly pleaded. Fine. Alaric reluctantly agreed. After getting his approval, Matilda quickly took off her armor, leaving only her inner shirt, which was drenched in her sweat. That feels better. She intentionally let out a moan. Alaric rubbed his temples. I forgot about her trait. Can those poor blacksmiths and apprentices keep their focus with her around? He could already imagine the scene. I think it's better if you put on the armor. Drenched in her sweat, her inner shirt clung tightly around her body, fully displaying her curvaceous figure. Matilda grumbled, but she still followed his command. Your servant obeys. That's better. Alaric was pleased after she put on her armor. Although it couldn't hide her beautiful face, much of her charm was hidden beneath the armor. Soon they arrived at the smithing room. That should be the smithing room. Alaric walked towards a room where a small crowd had gathered outside. I heard they are making a relic-level shield for someone higher up in the Estanian army. Those spineless bastards. They are traitors. How dare they make equipment for those Estanian dogs? Alaric and Matilda could hear the crowd cursing as they walked closer. Matilda looked at Alaric to gauge his reaction, but the latter remained calm, as if unbothered by the harsh words. However, she was Alaric's subordinate, so she would never allow anyone to talk badly about her lord. "Hey, watch your mouth," Matilda scolded with a sharp look. She even grabbed the handle of her sword to make them think that she would swing it at any moment. Hearing her voice, the crowd was startled. They turned around and were scared witless when they saw the Estanian emblem on their armor. "They are Estanian warriors. Run! They will kill us!" More than half of the gathered crowd ran away in fear, but a few stubbornly refused to leave. They even glared at the two with fearless faces. Looking at these people, Matilda was inwardly nervous. Her physical abilities weren't that much higher compared to those of ordinary civilians, and she wasn't confident in her combat skills. What should I do? His Highness is not taking action. Does he want me to drive these people away by myself? She immediately understood Alaric's intentions, so she could only pretend to act tough. While she was ruminating about how to deal with the situation, one of the people who remained suddenly spoke. "Look at them acting like they own the place." Matilda's eyes flashed with anger. She walked towards the person who had spoken and gave him a resounding slap. "Pa! Say that one more time and I promise you that it will be my sword hitting you next," she muttered as she stared deeply at the man. The man's gaze was filled with hatred, but he didn't dare utter a word. He just snorted and left with heavy strides. His companions also nervously walked away. Seeing this, Matilda heaved a sigh of relief. "Good thing I have this armor on. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to scare them off," she chuckled. Alaric noticed her trembling arms. He patted her shoulders and said, "Not bad. But it seems like I need to teach you how to wield that sword." Matilda stared at him with concern. "What does that mean? He is not thinking of conscripting me into the army, right?" "Your Highness, I'm really clumsy and weak. I don't think I have what it takes to be a warrior." She smiled nervously. Alaric grinned at her words. "Do you know Aaliyah? She was only a young maidservant when I first met her. Believe in yourself. You have more potential than you think. For her to become a qualified assistant, she needs to be skilled enough to protect herself. I remember Scylla had some decent sword skills. I should let her train Matilda since I'm so busy these days." At this moment, they finally entered the smithing room. The temperature noticeably increased and the hammering sounds became louder. "Your Highness, what are you doing here?" One of the apprentices was stunned when he noticed him. When they were taking Alaric's measurements, they happened to learn about his identity. "Your Highness!" The other apprentices also noticed him. They rushed to his side and bowed nervously. "Relax. I just want to take a look at your progress. How is it going?" Alaric chuckled. "The materials you provided were of great quality, but they are hard to smelt. We even had to ask for assistance from a knight too." The apprentices told him about the difficulties they faced during the smelting process. While they were chatting with Alaric, the apprentices finally noticed the woman who had come with him. She had a pair of monolid eyes, smooth black hair, and a strikingly beautiful face. From her facial features, they could tell that she was of Veronican descent. It took them a great deal of effort to take their eyes off of her. If Alaric weren't here, they might have already bombarded her with questions. A moment later, the apprentices brought them to observe the smelting process. The blacksmiths were so focused on their tasks. Alaric realized that his presence was only making them uncomfortable, so he decided to leave after observing for a while. "Did you ask them when the shield will be completed?" Alaric asked as they walked out of the smithing room. Matilda nodded. "Yes, Your Highness. They told me that the shield will be completed in 2 to 3 days. Speaking of which, what trait does Your Highness plan to engrave on the shield?" she asked curiously. "I'm not really sure just yet. I already have a few options in mind, but I still haven't decided which one to choose." Alaric replied. "What kind of engraved ability do you think would be best for the shield?" Matilda rubbed her chin as she pondered deeply. "Since it's a shield, Choosing a defensive engraved ability would be the most appropriate choice. When she said this, an ordinary-looking face suddenly crossed her mind. I remember a two-ringed beast soul adept in the Griffin Knight's Order who has a shock absorption integrated monster trait. Alaric raised an eyebrow. Shock absorption? That doesn't sound impressive. Matilda smiled as she explained. It's one of the most common traits a monster possesses. It makes them more resilient and resistant to attacks. Although it's not as flashy as other traits, using shock absorption doesn't require much mana. In a prolonged battle, the one with more mana to spare will likely end up as the victor. Hearing this, Alaric fell into deep thought. She is right. I would run out of mana fast if I choose a trait that drains a lot of mana. I will give it some thought. He decided to put her suggestion into his choices. In the imperial castle of Haroun, the current emperor, Arsientus van Haroun, sat on his throne with a gloomy expression. The emperor looked at his retainers and asked with a cold voice, "Is there still no word from Donovan?" They could sense the emperor's anger and impatience, so they were hesitant to respond. "Why is no one answering? Have you all gone deaf?" Arsientus slammed the newly repaired armrest, destroying it once more. Bang! With a dark look, the emperor muttered, "The Estanian troops have already conquered Noyum, and they divided their army to attack Zerkith and Nakalub at the same time." What made him more infuriated was Leroy's betrayal. He was only a commoner, but Arsientus gave him a noble title because of his massive potential. "That traitorous bastard! How dare he betray me?" "Your Majesty, we still have a sizable number of troops. We can send them to resist the Estanian forces," one of his retainers suggested. Hearing this, Arsientus frowned. What can they do when the enemies have venerables on their side? "Do you want to send our soldiers to their deaths?" "Your Majesty, you mentioned that the Estanian troops have divided their army. I guess that most of their troops are heading to Nakalub. This means that they only sent a smaller portion of their troops to Zerkith. Why don't we send our soldiers to assist Zerkith? This should buy us enough time until Veronica gives us their response." The emperor thought deeply. The plan was feasible, but he was worried that it would only complicate the situation. "Those Estanian bastards have repeatedly provoked us ever since they took control of those 3 cities. They don't even place me in their eyes anymore." Taking a deep breath, he asked, "How many warriors can we gather?" "If we summon the scattered troops, we can gather 500,000 warriors in 2 weeks. If we force the aristocrats to send their private armies, we can gather close to 1,000,000 troops, but it would take a much longer time." His retainers replied. Arsientus furrowed his eyebrows. "We cannot wait that long. By then, those Estanian bastards would have already conquered Nakalub and Zerkith. Summon the scattered troops and send them to Ramelin. Send your fastest messenger birds to deliver my message. Send word to the noble houses and tell them that Haroun requires their military support. If they refuse to assist, punish them accordingly." He gave a series of instructions to his retainers. "Yes, Your Majesty. We obey Your Majesty's commands." Arsientus suddenly stood up. His towering height intimidated his retainers. "I need all of the armored Wyvern Corps in front of the castle within 30 minutes. I will participate in this battle," he announced authoritatively. Everyone was stunned by his words. The emperor was also a formidable warrior, but ever since he sat on the throne, he had never stepped onto the battlefield again. "John Philip Estania, since you dare send your sons to my lands, don't blame me for what I'm about to do." His eyes flashed with intense fury, his aura fluctuating wildly. 2 weeks later, Lucas and his troops finally arrived at the territory of Zerkith. "Took us longer to get here," Lucas thought to himself as he looked at the distant city surrounded by tall earthen walls. The path leading to Zerkith was unsuitable for a large army, so they had to march slowly. They also had to pass by numerous rough terrains and dangerous locations. "The enemy should already be aware of our presence by now, so we cannot afford to rest. Fill your bellies as we march towards the city. You might not get the chance to eat later," Lucas shouted to his troops. Hearing this, the soldiers quickly grabbed the dried rations they had prepared and took big bites. Lucas turned his head to the person behind him. Sherwin, how should we attack the city? The old transcendent knight narrowed his eyes. We are still too far from the city, my lord. We need to get closer before I can give you a proper answer. Lucas nodded upon hearing this. All right, just let me know once you've thought of a plan. I understand. Sherwin saluted. The Estanian army marched towards Zerkith at a moderate pace. When the soldiers stationed atop the walls saw them, they immediately sounded the alarm bells. Everyone in the city panicked when they heard the alarm bells ringing. It was a sign that war was imminent. At this moment, Sherwin completed his initial observations. My lord, the enemies are intimidated by our presence. They must have already heard what happened to Noyam. We can try to persuade them to surrender, Sherwin suggested. He noticed that the troops above the walls were unorganized and disorderly. It was obvious that they were flustered, which was understandable with the successive defeats that Harun's troops had faced. Lucas stared deeply at him and asked with a frown, "What if they don't agree?" Sherwin's eyes suddenly turned cold as he responded, "Then we will attack them with full force." Hearing this, Lucas nodded. "Fine. You have my approval." They had already done this before, so he was quite confident in Sherwin's negotiating ability. After getting his permission, Sherwin immediately assembled a small team to follow him. Lucas didn't follow them, but he kept an eye on the situation so he could immediately react if something went wrong. Sherwin brought the 5 people he chose and slowly marched towards the main gate of the city. They raised the white flags to signal their intentions. However, something unexpected happened. When they stepped into the enemy's range, arrows suddenly came flying overhead. Seeing this, Sherwin's face fell. "Retreat at once." Lucas, who was watching from a distance, became furious when he saw this. "So they want war." He raised his hand and gestured. "Artillery units, forward. Destroy the gate. Cavalry and infantry units, stand by and wait for my commands." As soon as he gave the commands, the Estanian troops immediately took action. Zerkith strongly resisted the attacks. Their catapults hurled dozens of boulders towards the Estanian army, preventing them from advancing. They also had ballistas atop their walls, releasing a barrage of arrows that kept the Estanian army in check. With the unexpectedly strong defenses of the city, Lucas's army failed to destroy the gates. Aside from some minor cracks on the city walls, the damage was minimal. The first day of the battle ended just like that. The Estanian troops set up their camp a few kilometers from the city. Lucas's tent was located in the middle of the camp. At this moment, he was receiving the reports from the commanders of the artillery units. "My lord, we don't have many arrows left for our ballistas. Half of the boulders we prepared for the attack have also been used during the siege this morning." Lucas frowned upon hearing the reports. If they ran out of ammunition for their artillery, the troops would be forced to scale the walls without cover fire. "We need to destroy their gates tomorrow," he spoke in a cold voice. "My lord, without our artillery, it will be difficult. Unless you—" Sherwin didn't continue his words, but everyone understood what he implied. Only Lucas could destroy the gates. "I will do just that." Lucas nodded, his eyes looking grim. Initially, he intended to preserve his strength in case of unexpected variables. However, things wouldn't go smoothly for them without his intervention. Hearing this, the faces of the commanders lit up. As long as Lucas made a move, those sturdy gates would definitely collapse. "Inform the rest of the military officers. Tomorrow, we must conquer Zerkith," Lucas instructed with authority. "Yes, my lord." The next day, the Estanian troops moved into battle formation. The cavalrymen and the infantrymen lined up, prepared to charge at a moment's signal. Meanwhile, Lucas stood at the very forefront of the formation, holding a sword in his hand. Without any warning, his figure suddenly blurred and quickly disappeared. Whoosh! He rushed towards the city's main gate while gathering momentum for his attack. Halfway through his charge, his energy peaked, his mana fluctuating intensely. He was so fast that the enemy soldiers stationed atop the walls were late to react. When they began firing their arrows, Lucas had already crossed 2/3 of the way and his speed had increased further, making it more difficult for the archers to take aim. Don't let him get near the gate. Drop the boulders and pour the boiling tar when he gets close. An anxious voice resounded atop the wall, echoing across the land. It was the voice of the commander of Zerkatha's city defense forces. Following his shout, large boulders were dropped from the top of the walls. The soldiers also poured the boiling tar from the large earthen pots. Seeing this, Lucas snorted as he swung his sword. Whoosh! The boulder that was about to crash into him was sliced cleanly in half. Do you think a mere boiling tar can penetrate my defense? With mana protecting him, the boiling tar couldn't even touch his armor. In the next moment, he appeared in front of the gate and swung his sword with full force. Whoosh! Bang! The sturdy gate quickly collapsed under the tremendous force of his attack. When the soldiers of Zerkath saw this, their faces immediately turned pale with fright. Soldiers of Astania, charge! Lucas roared while raising his sword into the air. Hearing this, the soldiers of Astania immediately charged forward. Their heavy steps caused the ground to shake. Zerkatha's city defense forces reacted right away. They aimed their catapults and various artillery weapons at the approaching enemy troops. Suddenly, a figure leaped into the air and landed atop the wall, making the defenders fall into panic. It's him. The enemy venerable has come to kill us. Stop him. He is just alone. We have thousands of warriors here. Hundreds of brave warriors charged towards Lucas, brandishing their weapons with furious faces. Facing the incoming enemies, Lucas remained unperturbed. He stimulated his energy core and activated the engraved ability of his sword. A bunch of bugs. None of you can stop me. With a tap of his foot, Lucas threw himself forward, slashing his sword with overwhelming force. Whoosh! With a slash, hundreds of warriors perished, their bodies cut into pieces, a revolting sight to behold. After killing them, Lucas calmly walked in the midst of their corpses, his eyes looking unnaturally calm. Seeing him nonchalantly walking over their comrades' corpses, the soldiers atop the walls were terrified. Many of them fled in panic, causing a major disorder in their formation. Stop! Don't leave your positions! The enemy commander shouted to his troops, but it was to no avail. Panic had already spread and he could no longer stop the chaos. While the enemy troops were disoriented, Lucas went to destroy their artillery weapons. He also slaughtered the warriors who tried to stop him. In just a quarter of an hour, he had already killed thousands of soldiers all on his own. The path behind him was littered with corpses and blood. With no artillery to stop them, the Astanian army seized the chance to enter through the destroyed main gate. The city defense forces had defensive lines in place, but they were quickly overwhelmed by the overwhelming force of the Astanian army. 2 hours into the battle, Zerkatha's city defense forces were forced to retreat deeper into the city. Don't give them any chance to fortify their defenses. Kill them if they don't surrender, Lucas shouted as he jumped onto an enemy's horse. After giving the order, he squeezed his legs and urged the horse to chase after the retreating enemy troops. Kill them all. Conquer their lands. The soldiers of Astania followed him, shouting their battle cries to boost their morale. The residents of the city fearfully hid in their homes. They hoped that the invaders wouldn't come to pillage and steal their belongings. Zerkatha's city defense forces were able to build simple fortifications in the middle of the city. It was their last line of defense against the invading troops and everything was looking bleak for them. Sir, how about we surrender? These simple fortifications wouldn't be able to stop the Astanian warriors. The troops' morale is also very low. How dare you utter such nonsense? You want us to surrender to those bastards? Are you insane? Have you forgotten how many of our comrades died because of them? Say that one more time and I will cut your head off. The commander of Zerkatha's city defense forces was one of the most loyal men of Harun. He knew that they stood no chance against the Astanian army led by a venerable, but he refused to surrender. Hearing the commander's words, the warriors fell silent. At this moment, they saw the signals from their scouts, informing them that the enemy troops were coming. Seeing this, the commander immediately shouted, "Warriors of Zerkith, we may die here today, but we will never yield to the enemy. Raise your weapons and put your all into battle." It was the final attempt to boost his troops' morale, and it surprisingly worked. The warriors of Zerkith were invigorated. Knowing that death was inevitable, they all chose to abandon their fears to offer one last struggle. Soon, the Estanian troops came into view. "Release the arrows. Shoot them down." Following their commander's words, the archers quickly released their arrows. Thwang! Thwang! Thousands of arrows flew straight into the Estanian troops. "Su! Su! Su! Raise your shields! Protect your vital organs!" Lucas roared when he saw the arrows flying overhead. In the next moment, the arrows rained down from the sky, but the Estanian troops were already prepared. They raised their shields and protected their most vulnerable parts. Only a few of them were killed, while the rest managed to defend themselves from the arrows. The simple fortifications built by Zerkith's warriors quickly collapsed. They couldn't even slow down the Estanian troops. A fierce melee battle followed. The screams and roars of the soldiers echoed across the city, striking fear in the hearts of the residents hidden in their homes. Zerkith's warriors were like enraged beasts. They wildly fought, disregarding the injuries in their bodies. However, despite their efforts, they couldn't stop the more battle-ready Estanian warriors. In a few hours, tens of thousands of Zerkith's soldiers were killed. Even their fearless commander died at the hands of Lucas. With the death of their commander, the remaining warriors of Zerkith chose to surrender. "Tie them up and bring them to the city square," Lucas commanded his troops. There were still over 20,000 enemy soldiers left, a size that would threaten his troops if left unchecked. Although they had already surrendered, Lucas reminded his troops to be careful. "I should have made a move yesterday," Lucas thought to himself as he watched his men tie up the enemy soldiers. 2 days later, in Midgard, Alaric had just received a letter from his father, informing him that they had already conquered Zerkith. He wasn't surprised by the victory. Zerkith's army might be formidable for a city of its size, but there was no way for them to stop an army led by a mythical knight. After reading the letter, he smiled faintly. "All that is left is Nakalub," he mumbled. "Knock! Knock! Knock!" A series of knocks on the door interrupted his thoughts. Hearing this, Alaric sent a look to Matilda, who was standing next to him. Understanding his intentions, Matilda went to open the door. A grim-faced warrior entered the room. "Your Highness, we have received word from our scouts stationed at the mountains near Atarkin." While saying this, he took a letter from his inner pocket. Alaric frowned and gestured for Matilda to take the letter, who then handed it to him. Alaric removed the seal and quickly opened the letter. Upon reading the contents, his expression abruptly changed. "What? Harun still has that many troops?" Written in the letter was a report about the discovery of a Harunian army heading towards Zerkith via the mountain paths near Atarkin. The letter also mentioned that there were flags of the imperial family, which means that Harun's imperial forces have been mobilized. "I need to inform Dad at once." Knowing that the situation was urgent, he quickly grabbed a piece of paper and a quill pen from his desk drawer. Matilda was surprised when she saw his reaction, but she didn't disturb him. She knew that it wasn't the right time to ask questions. A few minutes later, Alaric composed a simple letter. He folded it and sealed it with his stamp. He then handed it to the messenger and said, "Send this to our allies in Zerkith. Use our fastest messenger birds." Hearing the urgency in his voice, the messenger nodded. "I obey your commands." After the messenger left, Matilda could no longer contain her curiosity. "What happened, Your Highness? I might be able to give you some advice." Alaric stared deeply at her and replied in a solemn voice. "Our scouts discovered a Harunian army with over 500,000 warriors heading to Zerkith. Our scouts also said that they saw the flags of Harun's imperial family." Matilda was stunned. If the imperial family of Harun is involved, that army must have come from various parts of the country. Considering the size of their army and the distance between Zerkith and Atarkin, it would take them 2 to 3 weeks to get there. Your Highness, an army of that size would take a long time to reach Zerkith. We still have time to warn Lord Lucas. Alaric took a deep breath and fell into silence. Laynard and Lord Dominic are still heading to Nakalub. If I request help from them, it would take some time before they can send troops to Zerkith. What should I do? Roar! A familiar beastly roar suddenly drifted into his ears. Alaric rose to his feet and rushed towards the window. He laughed excitedly when he saw the familiar figure circling above the sky. Zephyr! How did you come here on your own, buddy? He jumped out of the window and landed on the ground. Turning his head, he saw a group of warriors approaching. He gestured at them not to worry and to return to their posts. Whoosh! Suddenly, the beast flying above the clouds swooped down and landed before him. Zephyr, I'm glad to see you. Alaric smiled as he walked forward to stroke the beast's fur. The draconic lion emitted a faint sound as if to show its joy. It lowered its head and nudged him gently. Alaric chuckled and stroked its head. He inspected the beast's body and noticed that its wounds had already healed. Only scars remained from the gruesome wounds it had suffered. You must have been bored out of your mind since I wasn't there. Although they couldn't share a conversation, they could understand each other's emotions due to the mysterious connection between them. Zephyr, you came at the right time. We need to head somewhere soon, but before that, I will go and summon the others first. Alaric was worried about his father, so he planned to head to Zerkith in person. He summoned all the high-ranking military officers of Estania who were stationed in Midgard. In less than 30 minutes, dozens of powerful warriors gathered at his mansion, with the weakest of them being an elite knight. Looking at the gathered warriors, Alaric told them about the situation. Everyone was shocked by the news. 500,000 troops led by the Imperial Army were a formidable force that could threaten the life of a venerable. They finally understood the source of Alaric's worries. I will head to Zerkith, so I want the rest of you here to manage the city's security while I am gone. During my absence, you all must follow Ivana's orders and treat them like my own. Do you understand? Alaric announced with a stern look. Everyone was stunned upon hearing this, including Ivana, who was among the summoned people. Meanwhile, the military officers were already aware of the relationship between him and Ivana. Although they weren't husband and wife yet, everyone believed that it was only a matter of time before they tied the knot. However, they were worried that Ivana couldn't do her task well during Alaric's absence. Sensing their worries, Alaric furrowed his eyebrows. To make sure that things will run smoothly, Sir Galliner will stay behind to help Ivana. Hearing this, everyone's expression eased up. They all recognized Galliner's power. With him around, they were convinced that nothing would go wrong. Galliner! Alaric called out. A figure rushed to his side and saluted respectfully. Your Highness, your servant is here. You must stay here and protect Ivana while I'm gone. You must listen to her orders. Do you understand? Alaric stared deeply at him. I obey. Galliner acknowledged his commands. Alaric was pleased with his response. He then turned his head to Ivana and sent her a knowing look. Understanding his intentions, she walked forward and glared at him. Are you heading there alone? She asked in a whispering voice. Alaric moved closer to her and leaned forward to whisper a response. No. I will bring a few people with me. I will entrust Midgard to you. But if there comes a time when your safety is at risk, you must abandon the city and prioritize your safety. He reminded her. Midgard meant nothing to him. He couldn't care less if the city was recaptured by the Harunian troops. All right, I will take care of Midgard for your sake, but you must return soon. I might be the princess of an elven kingdom, but I don't have the confidence to manage a human city. She expressed her concern. Alaric smiled faintly at her words. Don't worry. There is someone here who will assist you with administrative work. Hearing this, Ivana raised an eyebrow. Are you talking about that woman? She had a gut feeling about who he was talking about. Alaric nodded. Don't underestimate her. She is a lot smarter than you think. If you ever find yourself uncertain of what to do, you can seek her advice. Ivana held some prejudice towards Matilda, but she chose to believe Alaric's words. She knew that he wouldn't just randomly recommend someone incapable for such an important matter. Fine. I will give her a chance. Alaric gave her a few more reminders before he turned his head to the warriors. My comrades, defending Midgard is important, but your lives are more important. If you ever encounter an unfavorable situation, don't hesitate to abandon the city. Alaric conveyed his thoughts to the military officers. Now, I will announce the names of those who will follow me to Zerkith. If your names are mentioned, step forward and walk behind me. Sekus, Einar, Butch, Fredrin, Scylla. 5 people were called out. The 5 of you will follow me to Zerkith. Pack your stuff. We will leave in 45 minutes. He instructed. The 5 chosen people saluted and quickly left to get their personal items. After they left, Alaric looked at the crowd and said, "You must keep this information for a few days and make it so that our troops won't panic when they hear of it." "Yes, Your Highness," the military officers responded in unison. "You may return to your posts." Alaric waved his hand to dismiss the group. After they left, Ivana's voice drifted into his ears. "You must return unharmed." Hearing this, Alaric turned around and nodded with a smile. "I will." Half an hour later, the 5 people he picked had already returned. They only brought the necessary equipment and supplies. Alaric didn't waste any time. He jumped onto Zephyr's back and gestured at the 5 people to do the same. "Let's go." Sekus and the others immediately jumped on the beast's back. Before leaving, Alaric stared at Ivana and sent her a farewell smile. Whoosh! In the next moment, the draconic lion flapped its wings and flew into the sky. In Zerkith, the situation had mostly stabilized, but the atmosphere among the residents was still lukewarm. Some even harbored deep resentment toward the Estanian troops. At this moment, Lucas was busy delegating tasks to his subordinates when a warrior came to approach him with an urgent expression. "My lord, the heads of the aristocratic houses are protesting again. Our scouts also discovered that they are secretly gathering the family members of those who were killed in war." Hearing this, Lucas furrowed his eyebrows. Those aristocrats had been giving him a headache ever since his troops conquered Zerkith. He had already imprisoned most of them, but it seemed like their authority was still strong despite being held behind bars. "They just won't give up, huh?" Lucas muttered in a cold voice. He had been patient with them. If not for Sherwin stopping him, those people would have already been killed. "Call Sherwin here," Lucas instructed while rubbing his temples. "Yes, my lord." The warrior acknowledged the command and left with haste. After the warrior left, Lucas leaned on his seat with an exhausted look. He was swamped with work. Even with the help of his subordinates, there were still many things to take care of. "I want to go home and hold my daughter." He missed his daughter and his wives. A moment later, Sherwin entered his office. "I have come, my lord." Seeing him, Lucas gestured for him to come closer. "I believe you are already aware of the situation." Sherwin nodded. "Yes, my lord. My subordinates have already informed me." "How do you want me to deal with the situation?" Lucas furrowed his eyebrows. Normally, Sherwin would offer some advice, but he was directly asking for instructions now. He wondered what had happened for this sudden change. "It seems like the negotiations didn't go well." Lucas sent him an inquisitive look. Sherwin sighed and shook his head. "I tried to convince them, but they are a stubborn bunch. They refused to listen to my suggestions and chose to ignore my warnings." Lucas seemed to have expected this. "Since they refuse to cooperate, dispose of them quietly." Sherwin took a deep breath as he nodded. "I understand. I will send our most tight-lipped warriors to dispose of them." Lucas waved his hand impatiently. "Make it quick before they can do something troublesome." "Yes, my lord." Sherwin saluted solemnly and left. "Once we deal with those annoying bastards, everything should be peaceful." His thoughts were cut off when he heard a series of knocks on the door. Knock, knock, knock. What is it this time? He face-bombed himself. "You may enter." A messenger stepped inside the room, his face covered in sweat. My lord, we received a letter from our people in Atarkan. It has a special marking, so I came as soon as I got the letter. A special marking on a letter signified that it was something urgent. Hearing this, Lucas beckoned the messenger. Understanding his cue, the messenger took the letter from his inner pocket and carefully handed it to Lucas. The venerable glanced at the letter and saw a special marking next to the seal. With a deep frown, he removed the seal to read the message. His eyes suddenly darkened upon reading the contents of the letter. He stood up and said with a grim expression, "Summon the military officers at once. I need them outside the mansion within half an hour." Hearing this, the messenger didn't bother to ask questions and responded, "Yes, my lord." The messenger didn't linger and quickly left to deliver the message to the military officers. Lucas felt his head throbbing. He had just solved one problem, but another one had come up. It was a never-ending cycle. So this is how you respond, Arcientis. You just don't know when to quit. Meanwhile, in the imperial castle of Veronica, a woman of celestial beauty sat on her throne. She wore her dragon and phoenix imperial robes adorned with mystical jewelry. On top of her head was her golden jeweled crown, shining with resplendent light. This woman was the ultimate ruler of Veronica, Empress Esquila Veronica. Your Majesty, Harun needs your help. We will offer you anything you ask as long as you lend us military support. Donovan, the right-hand man of Emperor Arcientis, stared cautiously at the Empress. Although they were both venerables, Donovan didn't have his usual confidence in the presence of this woman. She was no ordinary mythical knight. She was known for her unequaled beauty and overwhelming power. She once announced to the world that she would rather be single forever than marry a weak man. Because of this announcement, many powerhouses from various nations tried to court her, but the Empress remained unmoved. To this day, it is said that the Empress had remained single. There were rumors that she had taken a fancy to a powerful hermit, but the news wasn't verified. What are you willing to give in exchange for my help? Be specific. The Empress replied in a strict but soulful voice. Donovan took a deep breath and gathered his thoughts before he responded. Harun is willing to offer a tribute of 1 million gold coins annually. We are also willing to offer. He listed a bunch of offerings, but the Empress's expression remained unchanged. Do you take me for a beggar? I don't sense any sincerity from you. The Empress made a hand gesture and said, Take our guest away. Donovan was stunned. The tributes he offered were substantial, but they didn't even catch the Empress's interest. What a greedy woman. Donovan gritted his teeth. Your Majesty, please wait. He stared deeply at the Empress. Esquila Veronica raised an eyebrow with a displeased look. Did you not hear what I just said? Donovan was nervous, but he couldn't give up just like that. Your Majesty, please tell me what you want. I will cater to them as best as I can. Hearing this, Esquila let out a smile. Double the tribute you offered and give me half of the cities conquered by Estania. This greedy woman. Donovan forced an ugly smile on his face. I accept your terms, Your Majesty. If His Majesty disagrees, I will beg him if necessary. Although giving in to her demands would nearly drain them of their resources, it was better than having Estania take their lands. Good. I will send 500,000 warriors to Harun, including 3 venerables. That should be enough to defeat the Estanian army and retake the cities they captured. The Empress stated calmly. Donovan grimaced. So stingy. She asked to double the tribute I offered and even wanted 3 cities to be given to Veronica, but all she could send was just this. He wanted to tell her to add more troops, but he felt that it would only displease the Empress. He could only swallow the words he was about to say. Thank you, Your Majesty. We will never forget this favor. Donovan did a fist-palm salute. Esquila waved her hand and said, If there's nothing else, you may leave. You can speak with the Grand Commander if you have more questions. Hearing this, Donovan subconsciously glanced at the gray-haired old warrior standing beneath the throne. This old man was the Grand Commander of Veronica. He held the highest number of troops in the nation. He was a mythical knight and also the most loyal retainer of the Empress. Lord Donovan, let us talk somewhere else. Please follow me. The Grand Commander made a hand gesture. Donovan nodded. This old man should be easier to talk to. Maybe I can convince him to add more troops and venerables. He thought to himself as he followed the old warrior out of the throne room. A moment later, he was taken to a pavilion outside the imperial castle. He could see the back garden and a man-made lake just a few dozen meters from the pavilion. The sight was beautiful and calming to the eyes. This pavilion is where Her Majesty relaxes her mind. The Grand Commander spoke with a smile. It's beautiful, Donovan remarked. The Grand Commander chuckled. The two silently admired the scenery before the old warrior broke the silence. Your situation is urgent, so I will make this quick. I will arrange the 500,000 warriors and the 3 venerables that Her Majesty has promised. It will take some time before the troops will be gathered, so you might have to wait for a week. Hearing this, Donovan hesitated before he replied. Lord Grand Commander, Estania has 3 venerables on their side, as well as hundreds of thousands of highly trained soldiers. The Grand Commander frowned. Get to the point. Donovan cleared his throat. What I'm saying is, even with the troops that Veronica will send, defeating the Estanian army will still be difficult. Maybe you can add more to guarantee our victory. The Grand Commander sneered. You want me to defy Her Majesty's orders just to accommodate your request? Speak of it again, and I will have your head this instant. Donovan could sense the old man's aura skyrocketing. The mana around them fluctuated vigorously, as if a volcano was about to erupt. What a strong aura! Just based on his aura alone, Donovan realized that the Grand Commander was significantly stronger than him. Please calm down, Lord Grand Commander. Donovan raised his hands with a wry smile. Forget about what I said. I merely said it out of desperation. I hope you understand where I'm coming from, he explained with a sigh. The Grand Commander recalled his aura and snorted. I will forgive you just this time. He then stood up and muttered. I am no longer in the mood. My subordinates will take you to your accommodation. Stay there and wait for my news. Without waiting for his response, the Grand Commander left decisively. Looking at his back, Donovan's eyes flashed with rage. There will come a time when you will regret humiliating me like this. Meanwhile, in Zerkith, the Estanian army was fortifying the city's defenses. They placed numerous traps outside the city in preparation for the incoming Harunian troops. However, despite all the preparations, Lucas felt that it was still not enough. Should I request support from the Crown Prince? He thought, but he quickly abandoned the idea. Even if he requested support from him, it would take weeks before the Crown Prince's troops could get to Zerkith. Suddenly, he felt a strong aura rapidly approaching from the sky. He lifted his head and narrowed his eyes. This aura. Just then, he saw the familiar figure of the draconic lion zooming past the clouds. Lucas also noticed that there were people on its back. Zephyr! He exclaimed, his eyes flashing with excitement. Zephyr was a catastrophe-grade beast with heavy firepower. Its flames were so powerful that they could kill tens of thousands of warriors in just a matter of minutes. The troops in Zerkith were stunned when they saw the huge beast coming towards the city. To prevent chaos from spreading, Lucas signaled his troops not to worry. When the beast got closer, they realized to their relief that it was a draconic lion, the tamed beast of House Silversword. In the next moment, the draconic lion descended in front of Lucas while emitting a powerful roar. Roar! Its beastly voice resounded across the city, scaring the residents. Whoosh! How have you been, my lord? Smiling faintly, Alaric jumped off Zephyr's back and walked towards his father. The 5 people who came with him followed him quietly. Lucas looked at his son. He was no longer the immature kid that he was years ago. His shoulders were now broad, and he had this kind of temperament unique to authoritative figures. His son, Alaric, was now a man, someone that he could count on. Lucas felt proud. I didn't expect you to come here. You even brought Zephyr and these people. He noticed an unfamiliar face among the 5 people he brought, but he didn't bother to ask. He knew that Alaric would explain it to him at the right time. This isn't the right place to talk. Follow me to my mansion. Lucas invited. Alaric nodded. All right. Before leaving, Alaric said a few words to Zephyr. You should rest, buddy. We have so much to do in a few days. The draconic lion emitted a soft sound. The group followed Lucas to his mansion. They rode a carriage that took them to the center of the city. After half an hour, they arrived in front of an old mansion. It was surprisingly modest for a venerable, but Lucas didn't mind. He was only here temporarily, so he didn't bother to find a bigger and more luxurious place. Lucas took them to the study room and gestured for them to take their seats. Would you like some tea? He asked. That would be perfect. Alaric nodded. Lucas sent a knowing look to the servants, who immediately understood his intentions. While the servants were brewing the tea, Lucas chatted with his son. Will Midgard be all right without you around? Alaric smiled faintly. It should be fine. I left Ivana to handle the administrative matters. Galanor is also there to protect her. Even if something happens, I'm sure they can take care of it. Lucas nodded. I see. Ivana is the princess of the Greenwood Kingdom. Handling a city should be easy for her. With Galanor protecting her, unless a venerable shows up, she will be all right. Alaric chuckled at his father's words. If only you knew how worried she was to take the job. A few minutes later, the servants served the newly brewed tea. My lord, I believe you already received the letter I sent. Alaric changed the topic. Lucas furrowed his eyebrows and gestured at the servants to leave the room. After they left, he responded. Indeed. The troops in Atarkan also sent me a letter, so I was able to make preparations early. Alaric took a sip of tea before he spoke. 500,000 soldiers will be difficult even with all the preparations, but there is a way to quickly defeat an army of that size. Hearing this, Lucas raised an eyebrow. Looking at his father's curious expression, Alaric continued. We just need to eliminate the commanders of their troops. They used this method to defeat Ramondan's army. An army without its commanders would be like a headless fly. Lucas rubbed his chin. Your plan is feasible. Killing their commanders should be easy since we have Zephyr. I don't mind doing the killing too. As long as they could win, he didn't care what kind of methods they used. The only problem is if a venerable is leading them, Alaric stated in a grim voice. Lucas frowned. There are only 2 venerables left in their country. One has gone to Veronica to seek assistance and the other… Hold on, do you mean their emperor is leading that army? He was shocked. He didn't consider this possibility. After all, the emperor is the most important person in a country. If something were to happen to him, the entire country would collapse. Usually, the emperors would never take action unless their empire was facing annihilation. Alaric nodded solemnly. Who else could command an army of that size? Moreover, the imperial guards of Harun are moving with that army. He had discussed this with Matilda. The latter strongly believed that the emperor was leading the Harunian army. Lucas let out a heavy breath. If Arsientis is really commanding that army, eliminating him will be difficult. That guy is more than a century old and he has been a mythical knight for a long time. I think he might be stronger than Ramondan. Do you think you can hold him down, my lord? Alaric asked. Lucas shook his head. Individually, he is stronger than I. I'm not confident enough to fight with someone like him. But if I join hands with Zephyr, maybe we can kill him. Alaric let out a smile. My lord, your son will join this fight. With the significant increase in his attributes, he felt that he could fight with a venerable. Although he hadn't tried it yet, he felt that it was possible as long as the enemy's attributes weren't that much higher than his own. Lucas didn't like this idea. Absolutely not. Do you think defeating a venerable is easy? He shook his head, his voice cold. You might have grown powerful, but your strength is still lacking against a venerable. Just stay out of this fight. I will handle Arsientis with Zephyr. How about you test out my strength? You might change your mind once you feel it yourself. Alaric challenged with a confident smile. Lucas was taken aback. He didn't expect his son to suddenly challenge him. You want to have a spar with me? Alaric nodded. Trust me, my lord. I'm not as weak as you think. Looking at his son's serious face, Lucas scrunched his eyebrows. "All right, I want to see what makes you so confident." He stood up and said, "Follow me. There is a training ground behind the mansion." Hearing this, Alaric nodded. "You guys don't need to follow, and don't let anyone near the training ground during our spar." He didn't want his spar with his father to go public. There might be spies lurking, so they had to keep this information from leaking. "Yes, Your Highness." Soon, Lucas brought him to the training ground. The venerable wore simple armor and grabbed an old steel sword. He stared deeply at his son and said, "You better not disappoint me after boasting like that." Alaric equipped his newly forged shield and unsheathed his short sword. "I will show you my progress, Dad." Seeing his choice of equipment, Lucas raised an eyebrow. From what he remembered, Alaric was a dual sword wielder. He rarely used a shield. "Do you think a shield can help you win against me?" Lucas smiled faintly. Alaric didn't fall for his taunts. The usual rules. No using mana. "Fine by me. Then let's begin." Lucas didn't waste time. He charged towards Alaric and swung the steel sword. He didn't use any fancy technique or impressive footwork. It was just a simple downward slash that looked as ordinary as it could be. Whoosh! Alaric didn't dare underestimate this attack. It looked simple on the surface, but behind this seemingly ordinary slash was the strength of a venerable. He instinctively lifted his shield at the right moment. Clang! Lucas was a bit surprised. He didn't put his all into that swing, but it still carried enough force to overpower a transcendent knight. The kid isn't all talk after all. He thought to himself as he prepared for another attack. This time, he added more strength and delivered a diagonal slash aimed at Alaric's shoulder. Clang! Surprisingly, Alaric was able to defend himself again. Again, Lucas raised his eyebrows in shock. He used 50% of his strength in that attack. It was a swing that could obliterate an ordinary transcendent knight. "Dad, you need to use more strength if you want to defeat me." Alaric chuckled. He was amused to see his father's shocked expression. Lucas snorted in response. He repositioned himself and made a quick dash to Alaric's side. He thought of using the blind spot to catch his son off guard, but to his disbelief, Alaric seemed to have anticipated his move. He jumped backwards and lifted his shield at the right moment. Clang! This time, Lucas knew that it wasn't a fluke. Since when did this kid learn how to use a shield? He finally got serious and treated the spar like an actual battle. He didn't want his son to put himself into a dangerous battle, so he planned on making him realize the gap between a venerable and a transcendent knight. With ghost-like footsteps, he appeared like a blurry figure in Alaric's eyes. In the next moment, he released a combination of slashes and stabs. Alaric squinted his eyes and put his entire focus into blocking and deflecting the attacks. Clang! 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 This SS-Rank shield mastery is so amazing. Lucas couldn't even touch his clothes. Alaric effortlessly blocked the attacks and he deflected those that he couldn't. Lucas didn't even realize it, but he was subconsciously exerting more strength with every move. However, Alaric managed to miraculously defend himself against all his attacks. Narrowing his eyes, Lucas instinctively used his full power to thrust his sword. Whoosh! The steel sword moved like a serpent, zeroing in on Alaric's chest. Seeing this, Alaric gritted his teeth and decisively put his shield in front of his body. Clang! The force behind the stab sent him flying into the air. He groaned when he felt his left arm screaming with pain. Ignoring the pain, he twisted his body in midair to land on his feet. Damn! The recoil almost broke my arm. His father didn't even use mana, but the force behind the stab had almost snapped his bones. Lucas stared at his son with a look of astonishment. During that last stab, he didn't hold back in the slightest. It contained the full physical power of a venerable. No ordinary shield should be able to block that, but that's not the most impressive part. Alaric's mastery of the shield is already at the highest level. He didn't want to admit it, but his son already had the skills to protect himself against a venerable. With a deep sigh, he lowered the steel sword and sent a proud smile to his son. I must admit that you already have the ability to protect yourself. I won't dissuade you anymore, but are you really sure about this? Hearing his father's affirmation, Alaric smiled faintly. If we can defeat Arcientis, we can go home early. I miss my younger sister. I want to hold her in my arms. Let's do this, Dad. What else can I say? Lucas shook his head with a wry smile. Several days later, deep in the woods dozens of miles beyond Zerkith, an army of 500,000 soldiers could be seen marching. The intimidating auras emanating from the soldiers scared off the monsters living in the forest. Not one monster dared to get close to them, even those particularly powerful beasts chose to hide in their burrows. Arcientis, the Emperor of Harun, had disguised himself as one of the military officers in this army. He might be targeted by the enemies if he were to show his face, so he used this method. It was beneath him to hide his glorious appearance, but he thought that this was necessary to avoid trouble. Your Majesty, once we get out of this jungle, Zerkith will be within our sight. A voice drifted into his ears. Arcientis turned his head to look at the person who had spoken. It was a middle-aged man with long curly black hair. He had thick eyebrows and a thick messy beard. His appearance might look rough, but this man was the commander of the Imperial Guards, Kynn Greyhound. Is that so? Tell the troops to set up camp. We will attack Zerkith tomorrow, so they must be fully rested. Arcientis spoke, his eyes gleaming with mysterious radiance. Your servant obeys. Kynn respectfully acknowledged the command. Soon, the Harunian troops stopped marching. They began to set up their tents in the middle of the woods. Knowing that there will be war tomorrow, the atmosphere was a bit tense. Unbeknownst to them, there was a figure lurking in the shadows, quietly observing their every move. It was Sikas. He was tasked to determine the composition of the Harunian troops. Most of their troops are cavalrymen, and they also have an aerial unit with over 20,000 members. I need to report this to His Highness so we can make some prep era. His thoughts were cut off when he sensed an overwhelming killing intent locking in on him. They found me. Sikas decisively left when he sensed an unprecedented level of danger. He held his breath and quickly concealed all traces of his mana. Bang!